Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm just going to try this out here real quick. How do I make this move? There it is. Is there a way to go back? Yep. Okay. All right. Hope everybody's doing well. John Denemark for TransUnion. I run part of the communications business for TransUnion called carrier provisioning. I'm going to tell you in a little bit what that means, but before I do that, I'm just going to tell you one thing, okay? And that is that I'm keenly aware that I'm the last one here, all right? And that I am standing between you and that reception. And I will try to be concise and to the point, but I think I will also take my 15 minutes, so I'm going to make you guys a deal. If you can stay through the whole presentation, drinks are on me. Okay? I got you. All right? All right, so now let's get to so just a couple things before we dive into the use cases. Number one, first, thanks very much to the MEF team and for giving us the opportunity to talk with you today. So that's number one. Number two, you may hear us referred to by different names these days. Okay, we used to be Neustar, and I think some of you may be familiar with that. We've got decades of experience in the communications industry. We were acquired by TransUnion. The transaction closed in December of 21, so it's almost 2 years now. We're almost fully integrated, so you will start to see the TransUnion name more and more, Neustar name less and less. You may also see True Contact out there. That is our brand name for all of the communication solutions. Okay, so with that out of the way, I'll just tell you a little bit about my part of the world. We're really focused on helping our customers streamline and automate their order management. We also have some other parts to this carrier provisioning business, like TN inventory management, stuff like that. By and large, order management's the biggest thing. We've got about 300 customers, mostly in North America. We process about 1 billion transactions a year, billion plus these days over our platform. And we've got about 12,000 users in the ecosystem that actively use our solutions. So that is to say that what we do at scale for our customers. And one of the areas where we're really focused, and the reason we're here today, is on helping to streamline and automate the order management of wholesale network connectivity, the buying and selling of wholesale network connectivity between carriers. Okay, this is where MEF is obviously very active with the Sonata APIs, and this is where our interests align quite a bit. We're focused on solving some of those same problems. And before we get to how we do that and some of the use cases, I wanted to just spend a little bit of time just to talk about the environment and the ecosystem in which we all have to operate. So a couple things really quick that should jump out at you at the slide is it's a really complicated ecosystem. There are literally thousands of buyers and thousands of sellers across the world. Now, not everybody buys from everyone, but when we do implementations for our customers, we typically see, some of the bigger ones are in the hundreds, multiple hundreds of suppliers for one customer, for example. There are a lot of different interfaces out there between the carriers. There's APIs, there's GUIs, there is email, there's even some fax still out there. There is a lot of, and there are different standards that are being used. Obviously, in the U.S., most of it is ASOG based, but there's non-standard ordering also. That's the broadband, right? And then even with that, if a carrier exposes an API to support ordering or to support a part of the ordering process, like you might have a quote API but not order, it's a mix. But even if an API is exposed, and this is where LSO Sonata does come in, obviously, even if you expose that, there's still a lot of work to be done on the back end internally with the carrier's processes and their BSS systems to enable that automation that the APIs promise. And so where we are, I think, today in the ecosystem in which we operate is there's complexity, there's varying levels of partial automation, and there is a lot of manual swivel in order to manage the order flow, and then even internally within the carriers to kind of stitch together the standalone systems. So that's where we operate, and then the question is, well, how do we do that? How do we simplify this and automate it? How do we implement the LSO APIs? And our answer to that is that our vehicle for implementing those LSO APIs is something called Universal Order Connect, or UOC for short. It is a platform that powers two product suites, a buy-side product suite and a sell-side product suite. But whichever side of the world you're on, the benefits of the platform are that we help to order just about any type of wholesale connectivity from just about any carrier. That's the promise of UOC, and we'll talk about how we do that. And we can support all the different steps of that process, starting with address validation, serviceability, quoting, order lifecycle, even past that into circuit lifecycle management and trouble admin. And we've got the LSO Sonata APIs built into this thing. And crucially, we also have the other standards built in. We have ASOG built in. We have non-standard, we have TM Forum built in, although that's not used that much, but from a high-level perspective, it matters. And then we have all the sort of, at least in North America, all of this non-standard ways of ordering as well. So that's all built in to the solution, and the solution can natively translate between all these different standards and non-standards to allow for an efficient flow of orders between the carriers. So let's just take a look at a couple things here we'll take a look at it from a seller perspective, and then we'll take a look at it from the buyer perspective, and we'll talk about how the MEF-LSO APIs fit in, okay? So from a seller perspective, the sellers are looking, typically when they look at UOC, they're looking for a couple things. They're looking to streamline their wholesalers, their customers, their wholesale customers' experience with ordering, okay, with ordering from the seller. They're looking to automate that process as much as possible, and they're looking to integrate that process into their back-end BSS stack. And that's the integration into the BSS stack is typically enabled by a seller-defined API. We can be very flexible on that. It can be MEF. It can be a MEF Sonata. It can be something that's seller-specific, that is simplified, and that we use then to standardize that outward-facing, we call it the digital store or the UOC marketplace. We then expose on the seller's behalf all the different ways of ordering from that seller. If it's US-based, we'll have an ASR API. We'll have an ASOG-based API. We also have a UOC API, which allows for certain simplification of the different orders. And we've got the GUI, and we've got the MEF-LSO APIs built in. So to the extent that a buyer is ready to go in on MEF-LSO API, they just hook up to ours, we do the testing, then the orders can flow, and the seller can consume it via their seller-defined API interface. Now, from a functionality perspective, that middle bucket, all those blue boxes, we're not going to go through all of them, but they represent some of the major functionality buckets of the solution. So you can see address validation, order lifecycle. Typically, our customers want that order lifecycle. They want to standardize that flow and automate it as much as possible. But they may want also some of the others, and it just depends what shape their BSS stack is in and how much they want to how many of those systems internally they'd like to replace and essentially outsource. The typical domestic implementation, I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail because we just talked about it, but sample customers like Charter or Cox, it's a white labeled implementation that's integrated into their BSS. The GUI is integrated is white labeled, integrated into the overall GUI schema. And typically it's used today domestically with an ASR API and a UOC GUI. We have the MEF ready. If you've purchased UOC as a seller, you have MEF. It's there, it's ready to be used, but it has not been in the domestic environment, not today. In order to get to that, we have to go international. And so that's an international use case for how we're doing this. So, Tigo is a major provider of service provider in Central America and South America. They have multinational footprint, and we're bringing them together with AT&T International, obviously the biggest MEF-based buyer out there. And so to AT&T, we're exposing a MEF LSO Sonata API, just like in those previous pictures. Here we have to obviously test with AT&T to make sure that all of that works. And then on the back end, there's a little bit of work there because, again, it's not just exposing that MEF API, it's also working with our customer to make sure that those orders flow from front to back. And so we've got integrations into Tigo's address validation API, and then exposing the results out back in the MEF format to AT&T. We integrate with their availability APIs, which then we expose to AT&T via the POQ in the MEF standard. Same thing with pricing and the quote and order status and the order milestones on the MEF side. So there's a lot of work then to sort of integrate with all those different pieces of that BSS, and then on our side in that box in the middle to manage that workflow so that we can process those orders and provide the timely responses that AT&T needs. And then once the AT&T piece is done, and that should be in production later this month, this solution can then be used for all of the other ordering that Tigo needs as well. Because, again, we can natively translate, we are very flexible in the way that order can come in. So obviously, any new MEF-based buyers will just be put on that similar solution. The non-MEF folks, they can just come in via the UOC GUI or the UOC API. All right, I think I covered it. Let's see what we got here. Okay. So now from a buyer perspective, what does the solution look like? And again, the buyer in this case is the customer, and they would be buying the buy-side product suite. And the reason they would do that is because they want to standardize on one ordering process for their entire ordering operation. And we can support that with that sort of buyer-selected API up front or via the UOC GUI. Basically, the way we do that is we define a way that the customer is going to get us the orders. Typically, it's in all of our implementations. For example, Granite is a big customer. So in all of our implementations, let's say Granite, we defined a way for them to submit those orders in a standard way and a simplified way. And when I keep talking about simplification, but if you think about it, an ASR order might need 100 data points. We can do it with 20 because we enrich the orders as they process through. And that's a huge benefit because then what our customers can do is they don't have to go hunt around for 100 different data points from potentially 5 or 10 different systems, right? If we can narrow it down to 20, they can get it from maybe 2 systems. That's a big benefit, because that supports that simplification, automation, scalability, all those things that you want from an ordering operations perspective. So that's what happens up front. And then via that functionality in the middle again, we can then provide that order out. And it doesn't matter what type of order this is. It could be any type of Ethernet order or broadband order or transport order. It doesn't really matter, because we know how to deal with them, and we're tied in to our buyers via the product catalog piece of this. Okay, so they can tell us in their own language what they want to buy, and then we translate it into something that their suppliers can consume. It can be ASOG based via ASR, that can be API, it can be GUI, it can be email, however the sellers can take it. And via MEF. That's, again, it's built in, it's ready to go. So a typical domestic implementation, I think I just more or less covered it, but you can see the MEF API is stubbed out, because there aren't sellers that are using the MEF API at this point to receive orders. But there is a POC that we're working on in the domestic marketplace, and that's this one. So we process for AT&T and for about 100 of their suppliers, we process their ASRs. We have for years. One of the things that we have been working on with them and with Verizon over the past couple of years is this translation methodology that, where AT&T continues to send us ASRs, and then based on the order type and the area of the country, what we can do is we can deliver that ASR to the correct Verizon system on the supplier side. So we can deliver it via their ASOG ASR API. If necessary, we can deliver an Ethernet order, for example, via their TM Forum APIs. That's been in production for a while. And now Verizon's switching from TM Forum to MEF. We all know that, right? They're really focused on that. And so what we can do now is we've been testing with Verizon and AT&T for a while, and this is about to go again. In October, we should be in production for at least one Ethernet order type, where AT&T sends the ASOG order, we translate it into MEF, Verizon consumes it in MEF, then they send their responses in MEF, we translate that into ASOG, we send that back to AT&T. Okay, I'm being told that we're running out of time. So real quick, I think okay, I'll just skip some of these other slides, but basically it's not a standalone solution. We're integrated with the rest of the BSS stack, or can be. So that's important, right? It's scalable. It's built on a modern architecture. I'm going to skip this. The couple takeaways, I guess, to leave with everybody is, number one is we have the MEF APIs built into the UOC solution. The ecosystem is speeds in implementing the LSO APIs. We can help to bridge that timing gap. Okay, we can work with LSO APIs. We can work with non-LSO, and more importantly, we can bring volume to your LSO API implementation, because your suppliers or your wholesale customers can submit that order any way they want. We can deliver it to your API, LSO API implementation, and help drive the volume. And finally, we help with the BSS simplification as well.